Hey everyone, today I'm going to have a quick discussion with you guys regarding the most recent news that we have for PlayStation VR2, and more specifically, where does a Monster Hunter VR experience fall within the confines of console gaming? Remember that Capcom has already done plenty of VR things in the Universal Studios Japan side of things, where they host plenty of different experiences for VR as players get to experience being a hunter versus multiple monsters, but of course you have to go to an actual theme park in Japan to be able to experience that. So with the most recent news and the official release date for the PlayStation VR2, and knowing how Sony is willing to throw money at making sure things succeed for them, I was wondering what would be the appetite for the Monster Hunter audience to be able to have a Monster Hunter experience, hell, maybe even a Monster Hunter game in full VR, with of course this brand new tech available to us. So I certainly want to hear your guys' opinions in the comments. I'll certainly be reading some of that because I just find that interesting that Capcom has done some VR things, but they've never decided to bring them to the console side of things. And of course, like I said, Sony wanting to make sure that this thing succeeds in the same way that the PlayStation 5 has as well. Of course, probably is some sort of synergy in the making would probably grant players a interesting experience in the VR format. So do leave a comment, let me know what you guys think regarding all of this. So if you haven't necessarily been keeping up, essentially what Sony confirmed was that their latest VR experience will be releasing on February 22nd of 2023. It will cost a standalone $549.99, $550 if you're just looking for the basic headset with, of course, the controllers. They will be having a Horizon Call of the Mountains. This would be the most upcoming Horizon video game, specifically exclusively for PlayStation VR2. There will be a bundle available as well for, I believe, to be $600 or so, 649 euros or 570 British pounds or something like that, 80,000 yen. So quite a lot of money. Interestingly enough, it costs more than the actual PlayStation 5 itself, which, remember that just a few months ago, they raised the price on the PlayStation 5 worldwide except the United States. So not only are you paying more for just a base PlayStation 5, but you also need a PlayStation VR2 to be able to experience on top of whatever the games actually cost, presumably $60. I haven't actually seen any sort of confirmation. I think most games will probably end up costing between 60 and 70 like they typically would. So it's interesting to see them making this push. And the interesting thing regarding that is that, of course, plenty of games have been already announced. I believe they're going to have 20 games available on a day one experience. And we know that multiple high-profile Capcom games will be receiving some sort of VR standalone experiences. I believe Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 4, I think the 4 remake is also rumored to have some sort of VR PlayStation 2 experience there as well, and a couple of others. Actually, Primal, I believe, they also mentioned something along those lines as well. So, of course, all of those titles being, promoted for current gen consoles, but PlayStation being the only ones who have this VR experience, it does make me wonder where does Monster Hunter, of course, stands in all of this. Because let's not forget, just a few months back, a user, Velocity7, posted a very quick gameplay clip of them essentially running a VR headset and being able to play, I believe it was the Reverb G2, the HP Reverb 2, on a simple 3080 Ti. Essentially now with its last generation, video card, and playing the PC version of base Monster Hunter Rise on VR. So essentially what that did is allow you to free camera movement. You no longer, of course, have to use the right thumbstick to be able to move around the camera. Now you could just move your head around. The HUD is still locked in. It's not necessarily stuck to you. The front facing, think of it like the Iron Man helmet, if you will. It's not necessarily, you're not looking at it that way. But you do have the freedom of camera movement through just the VR headset. So, of course, that game was not designed with a VR experience in mind, but, of course, just a simple mod from a player who kind of understands a little bit about mods was able to just get this thing rolling, and it plays relatively well for what it is. I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below for you guys to check out the entire video where they're hunting a Tobi Kadachi and a couple other monsters, which looks really, really interesting for sure. So, of course, ultimately, there have been plenty of other VR experience, like I mentioned, at the Universal Studios. You should be seeing some of those clips there with the Volcana Hunt that they provided with. They had like full-on VR experiences for Monster Hunter, but they've never really brought any of those into the console format. Even with PlayStation VR1, Capcom never really did anything for Monster Hunter and, made it a thing for players to be able to experience. Not necessarily a full-on game, which I think that would be a relatively high ask for them to make a specific Monster Hunter game for VR. I think that would still be a limited audience, especially now with the PlayStation VR2 being not backwards compatible. So, you have pretty much only VR2 games are going to be able to be played on this thing. Of course, you don't have things like access to, I don't believe you have access to like the Steam VR tools or anything like that, which, I'm not a big Steam guy myself, but, the tools for like the Quest and stuff, when you plug it into a computer, are pretty good. You can do VR chat and stuff like that, which is pretty great. And just the experiences that thing alone brings will not be available for PlayStation VR 2. So, it is interesting that it's going to be ultimately game dependent, and just how many games and how many studios and publishers and developers are willing to put out the work to be able to have a standalone experience. And I keep saying the word experience because, again, I don't think many games are going to get like their very own VR experience game, but I can see them doing a VR experience. Like I mentioned, multiple Resident Evil games have had already. Resident Evil, what was it, like the one in the house, I believe it was 7. That one was pretty much first-person VR game, right? It was a super scary game from what I heard in VR, and people had a pretty good time with that. If you certainly wanted to crap your pants, but it was something that it was very niche. Ultimately, a lot of people didn't necessarily play or experience it in that format. You needed the entire PlayStation VR setup to be able to experience that. And for Monster Hunter, we do know that the next game will most likely end up being a PlayStation 5, PC, Xbox Series X, Series S type of experience. We don't expect it to be a Switch game unless Nintendo decides to drop a new Switch. We do expect that to be a full-on, current gen release. And Capcom finally doing something for a brand new console, a brand new extension to a console in VR2, with a obviously upcoming release, would be something that if they really wanted to push that and, try to get, help out Sony with some sort of contractual deal, that would probably be one way to go about it. If they want, Sony wants people to play Monster Hunter World 2, Monster Hunter 6, whatever is going to end up being called, on a PlayStation console, chances are you can bait people in, or, give them an incentive, if you will. I shouldn't say bait, but give them an incentive to play, if they have a PlayStation VR 2, to make sure they pick up the PS5 copy instead of an Xbox, instead on PC or Steam, since they're going to have access to, their VR experience. So that would be one way to go about it. Sony is very good at, locking in those sort of exclusivity, extra content deals. And this would be something that I can easily see them trying to achieve to make sure that they are locking multiple of those sales. This is something that we're seeing them argue with, even in court with Microsoft right now regarding, Call of Duty, for example, since, Call of Duty will eventually become a Game Pass game and it will be a Microsoft Xbox exclusive, and Sony doesn't want that. They want that, those sales, those digital exclusive sales, of course, for the money, for people to buy skins for their guns and stuff like that, to continue rolling in. So Sony certainly would, have the benefit if they make a deal with Capcom in one way or another to be able to have some sort of VR experience for Monster Hunter with it, whatever the next mainline game will be. So that's kind of like discussion that I wanted to quickly have. I wanted to talk about the PlayStation VR 2 and its direct correlation to maybe a potential VR experience for Monster Hunter for whatever the next mainline game will be, or more importantly, maybe they could just port over one of those Universal Studios presentation kind of like demos that they had, and and finally give console gamers a home experience of something that they obviously spent a lot of time doing, but they never really, took outside of a theme park, which, seems like a wasted opportunity, especially since those are like timed events. And once they're gone, they're gone. They're not coming back. So certainly want to hear your guys' feedback on this. Where do you stand as a Monster Hunter player on a future, experience for VR on PlayStation VR2, or maybe just on the PC side of things? If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.